The opportunity Sarah had been waiting for presented itself during the third week of advanced training exercises. Chief Williams announced that selected recruits would participate in a nighttime navigation exercise designed to test their ability to work under pressure in low visibility conditions. The exercise would take place in the forested training area adjacent to the main base, with recruits working in small teams to locate and secure designated objectives. Sarah noticed immediately that Williams had chosen the same recruits who had excelled in previous physical assessments. Jessica Chen, Maria Rodriguez, and Thompson were among the selected group, along with 8 others who had consistently demonstrated superior athletic abilities. Those who struggled with the physical demands of training, including Sarah in her assumed identity, were assigned to remain behind for additional classroom instruction on naval regulations. This separation created the perfect opportunity for Sarah to investigate Williams' activities without compromising her cover. While the selected recruits prepared for their nighttime exercise, she volunteered to help organize training equipment in the storage facility near Williams' office. Her apparent eagerness to take on mundane tasks fit perfectly with her established persona as someone trying to compensate for poor physical performance through dedication to less demanding duties. The storage facility was located in the same building complex as the administrative offices used by the training staff. Sarah had memorized the layout weeks earlier, identifying multiple access points and security measures through careful observation during her daily routines. The building used standard military electronic locks that she could bypass with techniques learned during her advanced SEAL training, though she hoped to find a simpler approach that wouldn't leave evidence of tampering. As evening approached and the selected recruits departed for their exercise, Sarah remained in the storage area, organizing equipment while monitoring the movements of the remaining staff. Chief Williams stayed behind in his office, which surprised her since she had expected him to supervise the nighttime exercise personally. Through the window, she could see him at his desk, working with documents and making frequent phone calls. Around 2100 hours, most of the remaining instructors departed for the day, leaving only essential personnel on duty. Sarah waited until she observed Williams leave his office and head toward the main dining facility, then made her move. She had approximately 30 minutes before he would likely return, enough time for a thorough but careful search of his workspace. The lock on Williams's office door proved to be easier to bypass than expected. The electronic system was an older model that Sarah recognized from previous operations, and she had it open within 2 minutes using a technique that left no trace of entry. Once inside, she activated a small flashlight with a red filter to preserve her night vision, while providing enough illumination to work efficiently. Williams' desk contained the usual assortment of training schedules, performance evaluations, and administrative paperwork that any instructor would maintain. However, Sarah's trained eye quickly identified several items that seemed out of place. Hidden beneath a stack of routine reports, she found a separate folder containing detailed psychological profiles of specific recruits, information that went far beyond what would normally be collected during basic training. The profiles included personal background information that wasn't part of standard military records, such as family financial situations, educational achievements of siblings, and even details about romantic relationships. Each profile was marked with a color-coded system that appeared to categorize recruits into different groups based on criteria that Sarah couldn't immediately decipher. More disturbing was a series of photographs showing recruits during various training exercises, taken from angles and distances that suggested covert surveillance rather than official documentation. The photos focused on specific individuals demonstrating exceptional physical or mental capabilities, with handwritten notes in the margins, describing their performance in technical terms that seemed more appropriate for special operations assessment than basic training evaluation. Sarah photographed each document using a miniature camera designed for covert intelligence gathering, taking care to maintain the exact positioning of every paper. As she worked, she discovered a locked drawer in Williams's desk that required additional time to open. Inside, she found what appeared to be communication, logs showing regular contact with someone identified only as Recruiter 7. The communication logs revealed a pattern of information, sharing that extended back several months, predating the current training cycle. Williams had been providing detailed assessments of promising recruits to this unknown contact, including recommendations for what he termed advanced placement opportunities. The language used in these communications suggested a level of coordination that went far beyond normal military career counseling. Most concerning was a recent entry indicating that Williams had identified 5 current recruits as priority candidates for immediate evaluation by external personnel. The entry was dated just 2 days earlier and mentioned that arrangements were being made for off-site assessment of these individuals. During an upcoming training exercise, Sarah realized with growing alarm that tonight's navigation exercise might be more than just a training event. If Williams was indeed part of a larger operation to identify and potentially recruit exceptional military personnel for unauthorized purposes, the selected recruits could be walking into a situation that placed them in serious danger. She photographed the communication logs quickly while monitoring the time carefully. Williams had been gone for 25 minutes, leaving her only a few more minutes to complete her search and exit safely. As she prepared to close the locked drawer, her flashlight beam caught the edge of another document that had been hidden beneath the communication logs. The document was a detailed map of the training area where tonight's navigation exercise was taking place, marked with locations that didn't correspond to the official exercise objectives that had been briefed to the recruits. Instead, the map showed what appeared to be extraction points and rendezvous coordinates, along with timing notations that suggested a complex operation was planned for later that evening. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the implications. If her analysis was correct, the night navigation exercise was being used as cover for something far more serious than a training assessment. The recruits who had been selected for their exceptional abilities were potentially being led into a trap, unaware that they were being evaluated by people with unknown motivations and affiliations. She quickly photographed the map and restored everything to its original position, then exited Williams's office and returned to the storage facility. Her mission had taken an unexpected turn from passive observation to active intervention. The recruits currently participating in the navigation exercise were her responsibility to protect, regardless of the fact that they had no idea who she really was or what danger they might be facing. As Sarah considered her options, she realized that revealing her true identity might be the only way to prevent a potential disaster. However, doing so would compromise not only her current mission, but potentially expose other ongoing operations that depended on maintaining her cover. The decision required balancing the immediate safety of 12 young women against broader strategic considerations that could affect national security. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside the storage facility alerted her to Williams's return. Through the window, she watched him enter his office and turn on the lights, apparently settling in for a long evening of work. His presence in the building while the exercise was ongoing confirmed her suspicions that tonight's activities involved more than standard training protocols. Sarah made her decision. She would need to find a way to reach the exercise area and assess the situation firsthand, while maintaining her cover as much as possible. If the recruits were indeed in danger, she would intervene using whatever means necessary to ensure their safety. Her oath as a naval officer superseded any operational security concerns, and she would not allow young women under her protection to be harmed while she stood by and watched. The next few hours would test every skill she had developed during her years as a SEAL, but now the stakes involved not just completing a mission, but potentially saving the lives of the very people who had been mocking her apparent incompetence just hours earlier. The alarm bell shattered the pre-dawn silence, jolting 42 recruits from their beds at 500 hours sharp. Sarah rolled out of her narrow bunk with practiced efficiency, though she made sure to fumble slightly with her boots to maintain her cover as the clumsy recruit from Texas. Around her, the other women scrambled to dress and prepare for another demanding day of training. "Martinez, move it," barked recruit Thompson, who had appointed herself as the unofficial drill sergeant among the women. "You're always the last one ready, and it's making our whole squad look bad." Ducked her head apologetically while internally noting that Thompson's aggressive leadership style reminded her of several junior officers she had mentored over the years. The young woman had potential, but her approach needed refinement. In her real role, Sarah would have provided guidance on effective leadership techniques. Here, she simply mumbled another apology and finished lacing her boots. The morning routine proceeded with military precision as the recruits filed out for their first meal of the day. Sarah positioned herself strategically in the chow line, close enough to overhear conversations between the training staff, but far enough away to avoid drawing attention. Her mission had entered a critical phase. As intelligence reports suggested, the security breach would likely manifest during the upcoming advanced training exercises. Chief Petty Officer Williams stood near the serving line, clipboard in hand, watching each recruit with intense scrutiny. Sarah had been observing him for 3 weeks now, and his behavior patterns were becoming increasingly suspicious. While other instructors focused on general performance metrics, Williams seemed particularly interested in recruits who demonstrated exceptional skills in specific areas that aligned with special operations requirements. Thompson, Chen Rodriguez, Williams called out as the 3 women passed him with their breakfast trays. Report to Training Bay 7 after morning PT. You've been selected for advanced swimming trials. Sarah's pulse quickened slightly. Those 3 recruits had consistently performed at the top of their class in aquatic exercises, displaying the kind of natural water skills that special operations units prized. The fact that Williams was separating them for additional testing raised several red flags in her experienced mind. The morning physical training session took place on the base's obstacle course, a challenging series of barriers, ropes, and climbing walls designed to test every aspect of physical fitness and mental determination. Sarah had run similar courses hundreds of times throughout her career, often while carrying full combat gear under hostile conditions. Today she would need to struggle convincingly with obstacles that she could normally complete with ease. "All right, ladies," shouted Gunnery Sergeant Morrison, the head physical training instructor. "Today we're adding a new element to your morning routine. You'll be running the course in teams of 4, and your final score will be based on how well your slowest team member performs. This teaches you that a unit is only as strong as its weakest link." Sarah found herself assigned to a team with 3 of the strongest performers in their class, including Jessica Chen, who had been consistently critical of Sarah's apparent lack of fitness. The irony was not lost on her that she would now be responsible for potentially holding back women who genuinely were giving their best effort. As the teams lined up at the starting line, Sarah caught sight of Chief Williams positioning himself with a clear view of the entire course. He had his ever-present clipboard and was speaking quietly into a handheld radio device. Her trained eye noticed that he seemed particularly focused on specific obstacles that required upper body strength and agility, the same physical attributes that special operations recruiters typically prioritized. "Remember, Martinez," Jessica whispered as they waited for the starting signal, "we're all counting on you not to embarrass us out there. Try to keep up this time." The starting whistle blew and the team surged forward toward the first obstacle, a series of hurdles followed by a cargo net climb. Sarah deliberately stumbled slightly on the second hurdle, allowing her teammates to pull ahead before recovering and continuing. The performance required precise calculation to appear genuinely clumsy, while avoiding actual injury that could compromise her mission. At the cargo net, she watched Williams track the progress of several recruits who scaled the obstacle with exceptional speed and technique. His radio conversations became more frequent, and she managed to catch fragments of what sounded like detailed performance assessments being transmitted to an unknown recipient. The fourth obstacle proved to be the most challenging for Sarah's deception. It was a rope traverse over a water pit, requiring upper body strength and coordination that played directly to her natural abilities. As a SEAL, she had completed similar traverses while under enemy fire. Now she needed to struggle convincingly without falling into the water and creating a scene. "Come on, Martinez," her teammates shouted from the far side. "You can do it! Just hand over hand, nice and steady." Sarah gripped the rope with deliberately poor technique, allowing her legs to drag and creating the appearance of someone fighting against her own limitations. Halfway across, she let herself slip slightly, drawing gasps from the watching recruits before recovering and completing the traverse with obvious effort. Chief Williams stepped closer to the obstacle, making notes while speaking rapidly into his radio. Sarah strained to hear his words over the sounds of training, catching only fragments like upper body weakness and poor coordination under stress. The fact that he was documenting specific performance deficiencies rather than strength struck her as unusual for a training instructor. The final obstacle was a 20-foot wall climb that required teamwork to complete. Recruits had to boost their teammates over the wall and then be pulled up themselves. Sarah positioned herself to go last, ostensibly because she would need the most help, but actually to observe Williams's reactions to the other climbers. As Jessica Chen scaled the wall with impressive speed and technique, Williams moved closer to get a better view. His radio chattered with incoming transmissions that seemed to be responses to his earlier reports. Sarah managed to position herself close enough to hear one clear phrase from the radio speaker. Affirmative on the Chen assessment. Proceed with secondary evaluation protocols. When Sarah's turn came to attempt the wall climb, she made a show of struggling with the initial boost from her teammates. They pushed and pulled, offering encouragement and advice while she appeared to fight against her own physical limitations. Chief Williams watched intently, making additional notes before speaking into his radio again. Negative on Martinez, she heard him say clearly. Physical capabilities below operational thresholds. Recommend standard track placement. The training session concluded with teams reporting their completion times to Gunnery Sergeant Morrison. Sarah's team finished near the bottom of the rankings exactly as she had intended. Her teammates tried to hide their disappointment, but she could see the frustration in their faces at having their performance dragged down by her apparent incompetences. The recruits filed back toward the barracks for showers, and the next phase of their training day, Sarah lingered near the obstacle course equipment, pretending to retie her boots while actually observing Chief Williams. He remained behind after the other instructors had departed, using his radio for an extended conversation that appeared more detailed than his earlier transmissions. The pieces of her investigation were beginning to fall into place, but she needed more concrete evidence before she could act. Williams was clearly evaluating recruits based on criteria beyond normal training standards, and he was reporting his assessments to someone outside the standard command structure. The question remained whether this was part of an authorized special operations recruitment program or something more sinister. That evening, as Sarah endured another round of gentle criticism from her bunkmates about her physical performance, she began formulating a plan to gain access to Williams' communications and documentation. The mission was entering its most dangerous phase, where she would need to take active steps that could potentially expose her true identity. Sarah Martinez stepped into the communal shower facility at the Naval Training Base, her muscles aching from another grueling day of physical conditioning. The hot water cascaded down her lean frame as she tried to wash away the sweat and exhaustion that had become her constant companions over the past several weeks. At 28 years old, Sarah had already accomplished more than most people dreamed of in a lifetime. But her current assignment required her to blend in completely with the new recruits. The shower room, filled with the chatter and laughter of young women who had just completed their first month of basic naval training. Sarah kept her head down, methodically working shampoo through her short brown hair while listening to the conversations around her. These women had no idea who she really was, and that was exactly how it needed to be. "Did you see Martinez during the obstacle course today?" whispered Jessica Chen, a 19-year-old recruit from California. She was struggling with the rope climb again. "I thought she was going to fall off completely." "Yeah, and during the swimming trials yesterday she was dead last," added Maria Rodriguez, toweling off nearby. "I don't know how she even made it through the initial fitness tests. She must have barely scraped by." Sarah continued washing, her face showing no emotion as the comments continued. She had deliberately held back during every physical challenge, ensuring her performance appeared average at best. The irony was not lost on her that these same women praising each other's athletic abilities had no idea they were standing next to someone who could outperform them in virtually every category imaginable. "I heard she's from some small town in Texas," Jessica continued, her voice carrying across the tiled walls. "Probably never even saw the ocean before coming here. No wonder she looks so lost all the time." The other recruits giggled at this observation. Sarah had crafted her cover story carefully, complete with a fabricated background that would make her appear unremarkable. According to her official records, she was a high school graduate from a tiny farming community who had joined the Navy seeking adventure and career opportunities. The truth was far more complex. In reality, Sarah Martinez was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, one of the most decorated female officers in the United States Navy SEALs. She had completed multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, led classified operations in hostile territories, and earned commendations that most military personnel could only dream of receiving. Her real service record was classified at the highest levels, known only to a select few within the Pentagon and Special Operations Command. The mission that brought her to this basic training facility was unlike anything she had undertaken before. Military intelligence had received credible reports of a security breach within the naval training system. Someone was selling classified information about new recruits who showed exceptional promise, potentially targeting them for recruitment by foreign intelligence services or terrorist organizations. The investigation had reached a dead end through conventional means. Background checks on instructors and staff revealed nothing suspicious. Digital surveillance had failed to identify the source of the leak. That's when Admiral Rebecca Harrison, one of the few people who knew Sarah's true identity, approached her with an unusual proposal. "We need someone on the inside," Admiral Harrison had explained during their classified briefing 3 months earlier. "Someone who can observe the entire training process from the perspective of a recruit without raising any suspicions. You would essentially be going undercover in your own military." The assignment required Sarah to temporarily surrender her rank and assume the identity of a new recruit. She would have to endure weeks of basic training that she had already completed over a decade ago, submit to the authority of instructors who were technically junior to her in rank, and most challenging of all, consistently underperform to avoid drawing attention to her exceptional abilities. "Martinez, you're taking forever in there," called out Recruit Thompson, a tough-talking woman from Detroit who had quickly established herself as an unofficial leader among the group. "Some of us have inspection prep to do before lights out." "Sorry," Sarah mumbled, rinsing the last of the soap from her hair. She had perfected the art of appearing apologetic and slightly intimidated, a far cry from her natural commanding presence. Years of leading elite military units had taught her to project confidence and authority. But this mission required the opposite approach. As Sarah turned off the water and reached for her towel, she caught fragments of another conversation taking place near the lockers. 2 recruits were discussing their struggles with the academic components of their training, particularly the courses on naval history and military protocol. "I just don't understand why we need to memorize all these dates and battles," complained one of them. "We're going to be working on ships, not teaching history classes." Sarah bit her tongue, resisting the urge to explain the critical importance of understanding military heritage and the lessons learned from past conflicts. She had delivered lectures on these very topics to officer candidates at the Naval Academy, but here she needed to maintain her facade as someone who found the academic requirements challenging. The shower room gradually emptied as the recruits finished their routines and headed back to their barracks. Sarah took her time getting dressed, partly to maintain her image as someone who moved slowly and deliberately, but also to process the information she had gathered during another day of careful observation. So far, her investigation had yielded several interesting observations, but no concrete evidence of the security breach. She had identified 3 instructors who seemed to pay particular attention to recruits who excelled in specific areas, but their behavior could easily be explained by normal training protocols rather than any malicious intent. The most promising lead involved Chief Petty Officer Williams, who supervised the physical training programs. Sarah had noticed him taking detailed notes during obstacle course runs and swimming trials, paying special attention to recruits who demonstrated exceptional athletic ability. While this could be part of his normal duties, the level of detail in his observations seemed excessive. As Sarah walked back to her assigned barracks, she mentally reviewed her plan for the coming weeks. The training program was approaching its most intensive phase, when recruits would be pushed to their physical and mental limits. If someone was indeed identifying promising candidates for improper purposes, this would be the most likely time for them to make their move. The irony of her situation struck her again as she prepared for bed in the cramped barracks, surrounded by women who viewed her as their weakest teammate. If they only knew that the person they mocked in the showers had earned her place among the most elite warriors in the world. Their perspectives might change dramatically, but for now, Sarah Martinez would continue to be just another struggling recruit, hiding in plain sight while hunting for a traitor within the very institution she had sworn to protect. Sarah slipped out of the storage facility and made her way toward the perimeter of the training area, using routes she had memorized during her weeks of observation. The forest beyond the main base was dense with pine trees and undergrowth, providing excellent cover for someone with her specialized training in covert movement. She had changed into dark clothing and applied camouflage paint to her face and hands, transforming herself from a struggling recruit into the elite operative she truly was. The navigation exercise was taking place approximately 2 miles from the main base, in a section of wilderness that included rocky terrain, streams, and enough natural obstacles to challenge even experienced personnel. According to the official briefing she had overheard, the recruits were supposed to locate 3 designated checkpoints using only compass and map, then rendezvous at a central location by 0200 hours. However, the map she had discovered in Williams's office showed additional locations that weren't part of the official exercise plan. These unauthorized sites appeared to be positioned to intercept the recruits during their movement between legitimate checkpoints, suggesting that someone was planning to make contact with them away from the supervision of their official instructors. As Sarah moved through the forest, she relied on night vision equipment she had acquired through her special operations contacts, along with communication gear that would allow her to monitor radio traffic between the exercise supervisors and any external parties who might be involved in the unauthorized activities. The weight of the equipment was familiar and reassuring after weeks of pretending to struggle. With basic military gear, her first priority was locating the recruits and assessing their situation without revealing her presence. If Williams and his unknown contacts were simply conducting an unauthorized but benign evaluation for legitimate special operations recruitment, she could continue her surveillance and gather evidence without intervention. However, if the recruits were in actual danger, she was prepared to act decisively to protect them. The sound of voices through the trees alerted her to the presence of one group of recruits, approximately half a mile ahead. Sarah adjusted her approach to remain concealed while getting close enough to observe their activities. Through her night vision scope, she identified Jessica Chen, Maria Rodriguez, and 2 other women from their training unit, working together to navigate toward what appeared to be the second checkpoint. The 4 women moved with impressive coordination considering their limited training, using proper tactical spacing and communication techniques as they traversed the difficult terrain. Sarah felt a surge of professional pride watching them apply skills they had learned during their brief time in the service, even as she maintained her vigilance for signs of trouble. As the group approached the designated checkpoint, Sarah noticed movement in the trees beyond their position. Through her scope, she observed 2 figures in civilian clothing who were clearly not part of the official exercise supervision. The men were positioned to observe the recruits without being seen, and they appeared to be using sophisticated surveillance equipment to monitor and record the women's performance. One of the civilian observers spoke quietly into a radio device while making notes on a clipboard similar to the ones Williams used during training exercises. Sarah strained to intercept their communications using her monitoring equipment, managing to catch fragments of conversation that confirmed her worst fears about the nature of tonight's activities. Target Group Alpha, performing above expectations, she heard through her earpiece. Tactical movement and teamwork consistent with advanced training potential. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2 evaluation protocols. The response came from a different voice, apparently someone in a command position. Understood. Initiate contact sequence when they reach the extraction point. Remember, this needs to appear voluntary and routine. Sarah's blood ran cold as she processed the implications of what she had just heard. The recruits were being evaluated by people outside the official military structure, and there were plans to make contact with them using deceptive methods. The reference to extraction point suggested that someone intended to remove the women from the training area, possibly without the knowledge or consent of their legitimate commanders. She tracked the recruits as they completed the checkpoint exercise and began moving toward what they believed was their final rendezvous location. However, according to the unauthorized map she had discovered, their route would take them directly through an area where additional civilian personnel were positioned to intercept them. The situation had escalated beyond surveillance into active threat assessment. Sarah needed to determine whether the civilians represented foreign intelligence operatives, domestic criminals involved in human trafficking, or some other hostile entity that posed a direct danger to the recruits. Her training and experience suggested that any unauthorized contact with military personnel in a remote location should be treated as a potential kidnapping attempt, until proven otherwise. As she paralleled the recruits' movement through the forest, Sarah's communication equipment detected increased radio traffic between multiple parties. The coordination level suggested a sophisticated operation involving at least 6 to 8 personnel positioned throughout the training area. This was far more extensive than she had anticipated based on her investigation of Williams' activities. The recruits reached what they thought was their final checkpoint, a small clearing near a stream where they expected to meet their instructors for evaluation and transport back to base. Instead, they found the area empty except for a note directing them to proceed to a new location approximately 1 mile further into the forest. The note claimed that the rendezvous point had been changed due to operational security requirements. Through her scope, Sarah watched the women discuss this unexpected development. She could see their confusion and concern, but they ultimately decided to follow the instructions as they had been trained to do. Their trust in the military command structure was being exploited by people with unknown intentions, and they had no way of knowing that they were walking into a potentially dangerous situation. Sarah made her decision. She would shadow the recruits to the new location and assess the situation there. If the contact proved to be harmless, she would withdraw and continue her investigation through other means. However, if the women were threatened in any way, she would intervene using whatever force was necessary to ensure their safety. The movement to the new location took the recruits deeper into the forest, away from the established training area, and closer to the base perimeter where external vehicles could access the woods without detection. Sarah recognized this as a classic pattern used by hostile forces to isolate and capture military personnel, and her concern for the recruits' safety intensified with each step they took away from friendly territory. As they approached the designated meeting point, Sarah identified multiple concealed positions surrounding the area where civilian personnel were waiting. The setup resembled an ambush formation, with the recruits being funneled into a location where they could be surrounded and controlled. Whatever was about to happen, it was clearly not a legitimate military exercise. The recruits entered the clearing cautiously, their training alerting them to the fact that something about the situation wasn't right. Sarah positioned herself with a clear field of fire and prepared to act if the situation deteriorated. The next few minutes would determine whether her weeks of undercover work would end with a successful intelligence gathering operation or an armed confrontation to protect the lives of women who still believed she was nothing more than an incompetent recruit from Texas. The clearing fell silent as 4 men in dark civilian clothing emerged from concealed positions around the perimeter, their movements coordinated and professional, in a way that immediately set off alarm bells in Sarah's mind. The recruits instinctively moved closer together, their military training alerting them to the dangerous nature of the situation, even though they couldn't fully comprehend what was happening. "Ladies, please remain calm," said the apparent leader of the group, a tall man with gray hair who spoke with a slight accent that Sarah couldn't immediately identify. "You have been selected for a special opportunity that could significantly advance your military careers. We represent a private security organization that works closely with various government agencies to identify exceptional talent." Through her scope, Sarah watched the recruits exchange worried glances. Jessica Chen stepped forward slightly, assuming a leadership role as she often did during training exercises. "Sir, we weren't briefed on any special opportunities. Our instructors told us this was a standard navigation exercise. We need to return to base for our scheduled debriefing." The gray-haired man smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "I understand your confusion, but I assure you this is completely legitimate. Chief Williams has been monitoring your progress and identified you as candidates for advanced placement in specialized units. This evaluation is simply the next step in that process." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger of her sidearm as she recognized the manipulation tactics being employed. The men were using the recruits' trust in their chain of command and their natural desire to excel in their military careers to make the situation appear legitimate. However, the remote location, the deceptive methods used to bring them here, and the lack of proper military protocols made it clear that this was not an authorized operation. "We would like to see some identification and speak with Chief Williams directly," Maria Rodriguez said, displaying the kind of assertiveness that had made her stand out during training. "This doesn't follow any procedures we've been taught." The tension in the clearing increased noticeably as the civilian leader's expression hardened. His 3 companions shifted their positions slightly, moving to better control the space and limit the recruits' options for movement. Sarah recognized the tactical adjustment as preparation for potential resistance from their targets. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," the leader replied, his tone becoming more authoritative. "This operation is classified, and contact with your previous instructors is not permitted during the evaluation phase. You will need to come with us now for transportation to the assessment facility. The recruits' military training finally overcame their confusion about the situation. Thompson took a step backward and spoke with unusual firmness. Sir, we respectfully decline to go anywhere without proper authorization from our chain of command. We're going to return to base now and report this contact to our superiors. The civilian leader's facade of friendliness disappeared completely. He gestured to his companions, who immediately moved to surround the four women. I'm sorry, but that option is no longer available. You have information and skills that are valuable to our organization, and we can't allow you to return to base with knowledge of this operation. Sarah had heard enough. The situation had progressed from suspicious to clearly hostile, and the safety of the recruits was now in immediate jeopardy. She activated her communication device to broadcast on emergency frequencies, while preparing to engage multiple targets in a tactical environment that required precision, shooting to avoid hitting the women she was trying to protect. This is Lieutenant Commander Martinez. Call sign Phoenix 7, she transmitted on the encrypted military emergency channel. I have 4 kidnapped naval personnel at grid coordinates 237419. Multiple armed hostiles. Immediate backup required. The transmission would reach the base command center within seconds, but Sarah knew that backup was at least 20 minutes away, given the remote location. The recruits couldn't wait that long for help to arrive, especially if the kidnappers decided to use vehicles to transport them away from the area. In the clearing below, the situation continued to deteriorate as the recruits realized they were trapped. Jessica Chen attempted to use her training in hand-to-hand combat, launching herself at the nearest kidnapper in a desperate attempt to create an opening for her teammates to escape. Her attack was brave but ultimately futile against trained professionals who quickly overwhelmed her and forced her to the ground. The sight of Jessica being subdued triggered Sarah's intervention. She had maintained her cover for weeks, enduring mockery and criticism from these same women. But she would not stand by and watch them be harmed while she had the power to act. Her oath as a naval officer and her personal moral code demanded immediate action regardless of the consequences to her mission. Sarah's first shot took down the kidnapper who was restraining Jessica, the suppressed rifle making barely a whisper as the .308 round found its target with surgical precision. The man dropped instantly, freeing Jessica and creating immediate confusion among his companions who couldn't determine the source of the attack. "Get down!" Sarah shouted from her concealed position, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command. "Hostile fire! Take your cover!" The recruits reacted instantly to the familiar sound of military orders, dropping to the ground and seeking cover behind fallen logs and rocks scattered around the clearing. Their training overcame their confusion as they responded to the voice of authority, even though they couldn't see who was giving the command. Sarah's second shot eliminated the kidnapper who was reaching for a weapon, while her third shot disabled the one who was attempting to call for backup on his radio. The precision of her shooting reflected years of specialized training in hostage rescue operations, where every shot had to be perfect to avoid civilian casualties. The leader of the kidnapping team finally located Sarah's position and returned fire with an automatic weapon, forcing her to relocate while maintaining protective fire for the recruits. The forest erupted in gunfire as the remaining hostiles attempted to regain control of the situation, while Sarah maneuvered to maintain her tactical advantage. "Who are you?" the leader shouted during a brief lull in the shooting. "You're not military personnel. This is a legitimate recruitment operation." Sarah's response came in the form of another precisely placed shot that forced him to dive for cover. She had no intention of engaging in conversation with someone who had just attempted to kidnap 4 American military personnel. Her focus remained entirely on neutralizing the threat and protecting the women under her charge. The firefight continued for several more minutes as Sarah systematically eliminated the remaining kidnappers while protecting the recruits, who remained pinned down in the center of the clearing. Her superior training, equipment, and tactical position gave her decisive advantages that the hostiles couldn't overcome, despite their professional competence. When the last kidnapper fell, an eerie silence settled over the forest. Sarah maintained her overwatch position for several minutes, scanning for additional threats and monitoring her communication equipment for signs of backup forces. Only when she was confident that the immediate danger had passed did she consider revealing herself to the recruits she had just saved. The four women remained in their concealed positions, uncertain whether their unknown protector was friend or foe. They had no way of knowing that the person who had just risked everything to save their lives was the same woman they had been mocking in the showers just hours earlier. Sarah remained in her concealed position for another 10 minutes, methodically checking each fallen kidnapper to ensure they posed no further threat while monitoring her communication equipment for the arrival of backup forces. The silence that had settled over the forest was broken only by the distant sound of helicopters approaching from the direction of the naval base. "This is Phoenix 7, she transmitted to the incoming aircraft. "Landing zone is clear. 4 friendly personnel on deck, all conscious and mobile. 4 hostile KIA. Scene is secure." The response came immediately from the lead helicopter. "Phoenix 7, this is Rescue Alpha. ETA 3 minutes. Maintain security until we arrive." Sarah finally stood up from her position and walked into the clearing, her rifle held in a non-threatening position, but ready for immediate use if additional hostiles appeared. The 4 recruits remained crouched behind their improvised cover, staring at the approaching figure with a mixture of relief, confusion, and growing recognition. "Martinez?" Jessica Chen whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Is that really you?" Sarah stopped approximately 20 feet away from the group, close enough to speak normally but far enough to maintain tactical spacing. The woman who emerged from the forest bore little resemblance to the struggling recruit they knew. Her movements were precise and confident. Her equipment was sophisticated and professional, and her entire demeanor projected the kind of authority that came only from years of command experience. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez," she said, her voice carrying the calm professionalism that had guided her through countless dangerous situations. "I'm a naval special warfare officer assigned to investigate security breaches in the training program. You 4 were targeted by what appears to be a human trafficking organization that was using Chief Williams to identify recruits with special operations potential." The recruits slowly emerged from their positions, their minds struggling to reconcile this revelation with everything they thought they knew about the woman who had been the subject of their criticism and mockery for weeks. Maria Rodriguez was the first to speak, her voice shaky with adrenaline and shock. "You've been watching us this whole time? Everything about struggling with training, being from Texas, all of it was fake?" Sarah nodded, understanding their confusion and anger. "I've been undercover for 6 weeks investigating reports that someone was selling information about promising recruits to outside organizations. Chief Williams was providing detailed assessments to people who claimed to represent legitimate career advancement opportunities, but were actually identifying candidates for kidnapping and potential sale to foreign intelligence services or private military contractors." Thompson stood up slowly, her expression cycling through anger, embarrassment, and dawning respect. "So when we were making fun of you in the showers, criticizing your performance, complaining about you holding back our team scores, I was documenting every aspect of the training program while maintaining my cover," Sarah continued. "Your criticism was actually helpful because it reinforced the impression that I was genuinely struggling rather than deliberately holding back." The sound of helicopters grew louder as the rescue aircraft approached the clearing. Sarah activated a signal beacon to guide them to the exact landing coordinates while continuing to monitor the surrounding area for potential threats. The investigation was far from over, and there were likely additional personnel involved in the trafficking operation who remained at large. Jessica Chen stepped forward, her face showing the kind of emotional processing that often followed combat situations. "You saved our lives. If you hadn't been there, those men would have taken us and nobody would have known what happened to us." "That's exactly what would have happened," Sarah confirmed. "The navigation exercise was designed to get you away from the base and into a location where you could be captured without immediate detection. Williams and his contacts had been planning this operation for months, using the training program to identify and evaluate potential targets. The first helicopter touched down in the clearing, disgorging a team of military police and medical personnel, who immediately began securing the scene and attending to the recruits. Sarah provided a brief situation report to the team leader while maintaining her vigilance for additional threats. As the medical team checked the recruits for injuries, Sarah's communication equipment crackled with updates from the base. "Phoenix 7, this is command. Chief Williams attempted to flee the base approximately 15 minutes ago. He was apprehended at the main gate with classified documents and communication equipment. We're also finding evidence of a larger network involving personnel at multiple training facilities. The scope of the trafficking operation was apparently much larger than anyone had suspected. Sarah realized that her weeks of undercover work had uncovered only one small part of a conspiracy that extended throughout the military training system. The 4 recruits she had saved tonight were probably just the latest in a series of kidnapping attempts that had been ongoing for months or possibly years. Over the next hour, as additional helicopters arrived to transport everyone back to the base, Sarah found herself in the unusual position of explaining her actions to women who had spent weeks viewing her as incompetent. The psychological adjustment was challenging for all involved, as the recruits struggled to understand how dramatically they had misjudged someone they thought they knew. "I keep thinking about all the times we talked about you when you weren't around," Maria admitted as they waited for transport. "The things we said about your abilities, your background, everything. We were so wrong about everything." Sarah understood their discomfort but felt no resentment toward them for their earlier behavior. "You reacted exactly as I hoped you would. If you had suspected my true identity, it would have compromised the entire investigation and potentially prevented us from stopping this trafficking operation." Thompson shook her head in amazement. "The obstacle course, the swimming trials, the physical training exercises where you seemed to struggle with everything. You were holding back the entire time?" "Every single day," Sarah confirmed. "Some of the hardest acting I've ever had to do was appearing to struggle with activities that I've been doing professionally for over a decade. There were moments when I wanted to show you proper technique or explain better approaches to challenges you were facing, but that would have broken my cover." The final helicopter arrived to transport Sarah and the recruits back to base, where extensive debriefings and medical evaluations awaited them. As they lifted off from the forest clearing, Sarah looked down at the site where she had been forced to abandon her undercover role to protect the lives of 4 young women who had unknowingly become targets of a sophisticated criminal organization. The investigation would continue, with Sarah resuming her normal rank and duties, but the most dangerous phase of the operation was complete. The trafficking network had been exposed. The immediate threat to the recruits had been eliminated, and the broader conspiracy would be unraveled through conventional investigative methods. As the helicopter flew toward the lights of the naval base, Jessica Chen spoke over the aircraft's intercom system. "Commander Martinez, I just want you to know that even though we didn't realize who you really were, watching you during training taught us a lot about perseverance and determination. You never gave up, even when everything seemed to be going wrong." Sarah smiled at the irony of receiving a compliment for qualities she had been deliberately portraying rather than genuinely experiencing. "The most important thing you can learn from this experience is that people are not always what they appear to be. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and never assume that someone's current circumstances reflect their true capabilities or intentions." The base came into view ahead of them, representing safety and the return to normal military routine. However, Sarah knew that none of them would ever view training, leadership, or personal assessment in quite the same way again. The events of this night had fundamentally changed their understanding of identity, deception, and the complex realities of military service that extended far beyond the basic training environment they thought they knew.